Ruth Roseworth groaned and rubbed her face with the heels of her hands for what felt like the 50th time that day. At this rate, she was going to turn up in Scotland with purple bruises along her cheekbones, where she'd been attempting to relieve her headache with a bit of amateur acupressure. Unfortunately, the headache was no longer the only symptom. She also had a crick in her neck from trying to sleep against the plane window, a sore back from dragging her suitcase all over LAX, and aching feet from being in queues for what felt like half her lifespan. Never again would she let herself save a few $100 by transferring flights through 3 airports. It just wasn't worth the suffering. At least she was finally on the actual flight now, the longest leg of her journey, the trip that would take her from LAX to Heathrow. From there she had a bus booked that would take her north, out of busy, bustling London, up into the northern wilds of Scotland. The prospect had faded rapidly out of reality, as her focus had been taken up by the excruciating minutiae of travel, of passports and documents and ticket confirmations, of what felt like endless reschedulings and cancellations and rearrangements. But now that she was over the complicated leg of domestic shenanigans and actually on the international long-haul flight that would take her to the UK, she almost felt like she could start looking forward to what the trip was actually about. Well, almost, she thought with a sigh, grimacing as she rubbed the heels of her hands down her jaw as well. She always carried tension in her jaw. It was a writer thing, she suspected, the tension of all that thinking and plotting and scheming that went on in her head just drifted down into her jaw and settled there. Every time she looked up from her keyboard or her notepad, she'd realize she was gritting her teeth hard. It was bound to do some kind of horrific permanent damage to her teeth one of these days, though her dentist always assured her that she was in good shape, dentally speaking. She was only 28. The awful problems were no doubt waiting until her 30th to set in. At least she didn't have a sweet tooth to worry about. The jaw-clenching habit was bad enough. She'd always been loath to put her poor teeth under any more pressure. Initially, when she'd been planning this trip, she'd intended to get some writing done on the plane. That felt like a joke now, the neatly organised notes in her carry-on backpack seeming to mock her every time she reached into the bag for a sip of water or a peppermint to ease the nausea that the rocky flight was causing. Right now, nothing in the world seemed less appealing than trying to work through the notes she'd written in a fit of excitement, way back when she'd gotten the go-ahead to actually take this trip.